In this video, I'm going to give you some more advice for actually turning the cube with one hand, and this builds upon the things that we've learnt in the beginner one-handed module. In the beginner module, I go over a lot of turning mechanics, so things like gripping the cube and the actual moves that I do for certain different finger tricks, but I thought I should refresh some points here and highlight some things you can do to make your turning a little bit faster. The main thing with one-handed turning is that you want to be as comfortable as possible. So obviously it will never be as comfortable as two-handed solving, and there's always some awkward moves or slightly awkward moves that you make during a solve, but you want to try and maximize the amount of R and U moves that you do in your solve, because those are the least awkward moves for one-handed solving. For the most part, and with enough practice, people can actually turn very, very quickly in one-handed solving with just R and U moves. However, it's the rotations and the other moves in our solves which are what inevitably slow us down. So here are some examples of how I would do rotations. So in one-handed solving, it's very important to have a good and stable grip on the cube. So rotations are something that are fairly important to get right, because otherwise you'll find yourself, slipping and potentially dropping your cube. So to rotate in the Y direction, what I do, and you might be able to do this differently or even better, but essentially what I do is move my three fingers at the back from this kind of neutral grip, move them slightly towards the left-hand side, so they're really far over there on the left there. And then as I'm tilting the cube, or as I'm letting the cube kind of release, I'm moving them from the back layer to the left layer, kind of one at a time, and trying to keep as many contact points with the cube as I can. But there is always a slight risk of kind of dropping it. But I'm reasonably confident at it now. So this is something you can practice as well, is just practicing the rotations that you make. To do a Y prime, it's a little bit easier. So I would go from the neutral grip, I would kind of move the cube inwards to my hands and reach around to the right hand face, and then rotate the cube like that. So move inwards, reach around to the right, and doing it fast looks something like this. X moves are a little bit easier than Y moves. So to do an X rotation forwards, what I do is put this finger to the top, move my thumb to the bottom, and let the cube fall forwards, like that. To do an X prime, I move my ring finger to the bottom and my thumb to the top and rotate back like that. Z moves, which you'll use a lot during your F2L, as I talked about in the F2L video, are a lot easier than the X and Y moves, because your thumb and these three things at the back don't really move much at all. Your thumb remains on the front center sticker for the whole time when you use Z moves. So it's just a very subtle moving these three fingers around the back here to bring the cube in this direction for the Z move. So just kind of rotating them around a cube like that. And then Z prime is just rotating them in the other way. So it's kind of like a spider on the back here. So this finger, the middle one, kind of remains fairly still in the back, and these two fingers around it are what kind of, I can twist it back and forward using this finger and this finger. So if I'm doing constant Z rotations, it's kind of like a spider in that these two fingers are constantly moving around the back here. The other way. So that's how I would do Z moves. I'm a strong advocate for using your pinky for right-handed moves and not your ring finger. So some people, their default setting is to use their ring finger for right-handed moves, but most people find that this is a fair bit slower and it limits you in certain situations. So if you're currently using your ring finger to do any sort of right moves, I would suggest switching over to your pinky finger as soon as possible. One thing that I mentioned in the beginner module is that hardware is fairly important for one-handed solving. So you want a cube which turns without too much force, but is also very, very stable. And also, if your hands are a little bit smaller, it may be worth looking into a slightly smaller cube, because doing things like reaching, especially for the R prime, like that, or for doing U moves like that, will be a little bit harder on a standard size cube if your hands are quite small. So those are a couple of things that you should keep in mind when thinking about one-handed hardware. So some specific drills that you can do to improve your one-handed turning speed are the following. So the first is just doing a lot of really casual solves. So going around the house or going around wherever you are, and either scrambling casually or solving casually as well. So you can just kind of try and experiment and rotate the cube heaps and use all sorts of different fingers and turn heaps of different layers just to get comfortable with using all sorts of different sides and that sort of thing. And you can try and speed this up and slow it down, make it more stable and fluid and that sort of thing. And then I guess just go ahead and solve, and you can solve casually. Don't worry too much about turning speed. Just focus on a nice little grip and make it stable. And yeah, casual solves I think help quite a fair bit in one-handed solving, because for the most part it just takes a lot of time to get used to the grip and the finger tricks, and then making those faster for one-handed solves. Another thing you can do is practice specific move triggers. So here's one that you'll be doing fairly frequently, is inserting a solved F2L pair into the front right slot. So the finger trick for that goes like R, U prime, R prime. And notice that when we did our R like that, we kept our pinky finger there, so that when we did a U prime, R prime, we can do the R prime straight afterwards. So R, keep the pinky finger there, U prime, R prime. And the inverse of that is RU prime R prime, is RU R prime, sorry. So RU R prime, like that. So I would do it like RU R prime, or potentially RU R prime, like that. Another thing you can practice to really try and max out your turning speed is just doing R and U moves, so 2 generator scrambles. So just scramble the right and face and the up face, and then go ahead and time your solves and see how fast you can do just the rest of the solve. So solving these 2 F2L pairs and the last layer, just using R and U moves. And that's something you can do to really try and push your turning speed and make it faster. One cool thing you may have noticed in the 2 generator example was my finger trick for doing U2 prime. And this isn't actually my finger trick. A guy called Andrew Nelson invented it, or like popularized it. Basically, it's doing a double flick of the U2 with just your left index finger. So pushing it once and then pushing it twice. And again, it depends on how flexible and how big your hands are. And it does take a little bit of time to get used to this finger trick. Certainly try it out and experiment with it. I like to use it in cases like this. So here I have an anti-soon, which I'll do from the back. So I'll do R prime, U prime, R, U prime, R prime, U2, R, like that. It's a little bit risky, but it's really cool. Something you can try out at least.